now hopefully going to rely on the wonders of connectivity to bring Umair Haque into the conversation. Umair, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. So, Umair, you can talk to us. Sorry you can't be here.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you today. It's very humbling for me to follow many of the speakers that have gone before me, whether it's Don or Tim or Charles Handy. What I want to speak to you this morning about is the idea of complexity versus meaning. And I'll start with a little anecdote. You know, last night I was thinking about what should I speak about this morning. This is the morning where I am. And I checked my Twitter feed, and JP Morgan, I don't know if some of you saw it, JP Morgan was having this Twitter Q&A. They created this Twitter hashtag called Ask JP Morgan. And they put out an open call to the entire internet saying, ask us questions, ask our vice chairman questions. And of course it turned into a debacle. People started asking all kinds of questions. And the anger that people felt at JP Morgan across the entire internet suddenly turned into a kind of raging torrent. You know, people were asking questions like, why aren't you guys in jail? Or why haven't you, why do we need to keep bailing you guys out? And I think that's kind of the story of not just the economy, it's this little Ask JP Morgan debacle. I think it's a very fascinating parable for us to think about for a moment, because I think it points to the deeper tensions. I think that we are living in an age of failure. And I think yesterday's great institutions are beginning to fail us. I think that we live in an age of zombie democracy, an age of vampire capitalism, an age of Frankenstein societies. And I think that many of us feel, especially those of us who are in my generation, feel like these institutions have become monsters, which are hunting us down in this kind of Kafkaesque Orwellian game. And that, in some sense, all of these institutions have become meaningless. And my favorite example is the idea of banks. Banks which are supposed to, safeguard people's money and then go on to blow up entire economies. Right? The very term bank, when we think about it that way, is a meaningless term. And so there's a deep cynicism and a mistrust of institutions today. I think that's something we all know, but I think it really helps to delve into it and to put some numbers behind it. So at my lab, we go out and we talk to about 150,000 people across the world, and one of the things we find is that the majority of people across the world wouldn't care if 80% of institutions disappeared tomorrow. If they just disappeared, if they went poof, people wouldn't care at all. Why is that? Because when we ask people across the globe, they think just 20% of institutions play a positive role in their lives. And the third finding that I think is really interesting is that of those 20% of institutions that play a positive role in people's lives, those are the institutions, those are the companies that outperform their rivals, not just by kind of, a few percent here and there, but by hundreds of percent, by 300% and more. And so we really have to begin coming to grips with the fact that people distrust yesterday's institutions because they're failing them. But how are they failing them? In what sense are they failing them? I think they're failing them not just in a narrow economistic sense, but in a humanistic sense. They're failing them in kind of the sense of eudaimonia, right? The ancient Greek word for living meaningfully well. So let me paint you a small picture of the economy to draw out the lesson that I think this holds for us and for the idea of meaning versus complexity. Let's think about the average global citizen for a second. The average global citizen is somebody that's making around $7,000. He's a man, and he may live, probably in an emerging market somewhere. So this guy is making about $7,000. Now, we know that the threshold at which happiness hits diminishing returns is about $70,000. So there's a 10 times difference. There's an order of magnitude difference. Now, in his lifetime, his income isn't going to go up by an order of magnitude. And so the idea that his happiness and what lies beyond his happiness, a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose in his life, all of the things that really add up to a sense that his life has mattered, that stuff is going to remain out of reach. Because no matter how fast the global economy grows, in his lifetime, his income may double, but it's not going to go up by an order of magnitude. And so he's going to turn around when he realizes this game, this very cynical game that is being played with him. He's going to turn around and he's going to very rationally and very rightly say, I don't trust you guys. I don't believe in you guys. The life that I want, a life of meaning, of purpose, of happiness, is forever beyond my reach. So why should I believe in your systems? And he's absolutely right to say so. And at the top end, that's the average. And at the top end, we have the kind of what I would say is the sad story of the USA. It was well on its way to being the world's first failed state. You know, it's a society that is failing in almost every regard. Life expectancy is going backwards. Educational attainment is failing. The median household is getting poor. And so we have this sense that in eudaimonic terms, in the terms of well-being, people's lives are not improving as fast as they could and as fast as they should. Though in hedonic terms, in terms of material wealth, people's lives may continue to improve. And it is in that sense that our institutions are failing. So why are our institutions failing eudaimonically? Why are they failing us in that most human of senses? Well, I think that is where complexity comes in. And I think they're failing us because we have built institutions that are economistic institutions. They're institutions that are unable to deal with the messy human reality of our lives. And that is exactly what happened in our little JP Morgan debacle yesterday. Last night, the idea that one of the most distrusted institutions in the entire world could put out an open call on the internet and then expect to receive this huge torrent of kind of internet anger that flowed their way is a little bit ridiculous, right? It begins to tell us that these guys don't understand anything about human life. They don't understand the basics. It's like the guy who cheats on his girlfriend every week and buys her, you know, a bundle of flowers and says, "Let's get married." It's crazy. So we have to really get to grips with the reality of people's lives in a eudaimonic sense. We have to understand that. And so I think the key to doing that is beginning to think in terms of outcomes. So when we think of complex systems, they have kind of three big problems, right? Emergence, disequilibrium, and uncertainty. Now, it's no coincidence that these are the same three problems that economics cannot deal with. Economics cannot handle emergence. It cannot handle disequilibrium. It cannot handle uncertainty. It needs things to be neatly codified and neatly mathematized. And we've built institutions economistically, and we've built ways to manage institutions based on these kind of economistic models and mindsets. And all of these things, the richness, the meat of human life, the stuff that really makes it meaningful, has been sucked out of it. What is that stuff? That stuff is not just, you know, the amount of designer jeans I have in my wardrobe, how many Ferraris I have in the garage. That stuff is like the quality of my relationships, you know, the state of my mental and physical health, how much love and respect I enjoy in my life, how much time I have to devote to all of the above. That is the stuff that makes life meaningful, of real well-being. And those are not products, right? Most of our institutions transform inputs into outputs. They're big black boxes. Input goes in, people do some work, and output goes out. But if we're going to think eudaimonic terms, not hedonic terms, if we're going to think in terms of meaning, what we need to think about, what we need to begin thinking about, are outcomes, not outputs. So outcomes, things that actually I realize in my life that make me tangibly better off. I get smarter, fitter, tougher, closer, wiser as a result of my interaction with institutions. Not just, did I get more, bigger, faster, cheaper stuff. Stuff is output. What we focus on are outcomes. Now, outcomes are emergent, right? They're not linear. Institutions can't make outcomes. People make outcomes. Institutions can help people. But to get people up this eudaimonic ladder of well-being, you have to build very different kinds of institutions because outcomes are emergent. Institutions cannot deliver them. You can't walk into a Walmart and buy an outcome. And so institutions have to begin to play a very different role in people's lives. They have to begin to inspire them and elevate them and educate them and transform them, not just serve them in this very anodyne language that we use in management. So we really have to build radically different kinds of institutions. And to do it, we need a new generation of revolutionaries. We need a new generation of rebels to spearhead what I would call an enlightenment, a real eudaimonic enlightenment. Otherwise, I think we are in danger of tipping into something like an economic dark age, which is very much what is happening in the States and across many parts of Europe right now. And so I want to end with kind of 5 very simple design rules for those kinds of revolutions, for those kinds of rebels, to build these kinds of enlightened institutions. I think the first principle is what I call real accountability. We often wonder, why don't we have any accountability in the world? Well, I think the answer is very simple. We don't have accountability because we don't have working accounts. We have accounts that ignore everything, from the planet to the impact on people's lives, to the impact on our societies. These accounts don't work. They were built for the industrial age. And so what we need are working accounts. We need accounts that really begin to measure the stuff that's missing in the economistic worldview. You know, the stuff that economists call externalities or internalities in their very dry language. You can't have accountability without working accounts. So if you're gonna be a revolutionary, build working accounts. Build real accounts for stuff that matter in people's lives. The second principle is that enlightened institutions have to be anti-hierarchical. This idea we have of CEOs and C-suites, frankly, is past its sell-by. You know, the most fascinating institutions in the world today are run by kind of 3 or 4 guys in a little coffee shop, playing on their laptops or their iPhones. They're not concerned about titles, or offices, and bonuses, and all of these things. They've got the world to change. The third principle, I think, is that we have to begin to build institutions that are mortal, not immortal. No institution should have immortality, because every institution lives past its sell-by date at some point. The fourth principle is that we have to build institutions that are what I would call unstupid. Okay, our institutions today maximize single functions, whether it's like shareholder value or profit or something even more ridiculous. We have to begin to build institutions that are not so stupid. If we have institutions that work on real accounts, then perhaps we can begin to optimize for a sense of, if we have institutions that are able to measure well-being, which is one of the things that we're pioneering at my lab, then maybe we can build institutions that optimize well-being. So we have to build institutions that are not so stupid, that are a little bit smart. And I think the fifth principle, which to me is the nearest and dearest to my heart, is to build institutions that have real ambition in the world again. There is no sense in which enlightened societies should allow large institutions to persist with a mandate of making smellier deodorants. That's not an appropriate level of ambition for 100,000 people to be working on. That is not an appropriate level of ambition in the 21st century, for millions and billions of man-hours and man-years of effort to be spent on. To think bigger, we need to have real ambitions that serve to elevate the human spirit and serve to elevate the idea of human accomplishment. So those are my 5 tiny design principles. But I think the bigger question is a paradigmatic. It's one of what kind of paradigm we wish to follow. Do we wish to persist in this economistic worldview where things are linear, deterministic, and kind of overly quantified? Or do we wish to understand that the things that really give our lives a sense of meaning are precisely the opposite. They're not linear. They're emergent. They're not deterministic. And they are definitely not purely quantifiable. They are very, very qualitative. And if you don't believe that, think about the first time that you fell in love, and maybe it will all make sense. Thank you for the time to listen to me, and I hope to be there with you in person one day soon. Thank you.